Elias Ward had lived on the wide lands of his ranch for many years, but the last 2 years had been the hardest of his life. His wife had passed away after a long sickness, leaving him alone with 2 small daughters to care for. Every morning, he woke before sunrise, fed the horses, checked the cattle, repaired fences, and then hurried back to make breakfast for the girls. He tried his best, but the weight of raising 2 children while running a ranch fell heavy on his shoulders. Clara, the older daughter at 6 years old, had turned quieter since her mother's passing. She used to laugh with a bright ringing sound, but now she mostly sat and watched the world with sad eyes. June, the younger one at 4, clung to Elias every time he left the house, afraid he would not come back. Their home felt cold, not because of the weather, but because something warm had been missing for a long time. One bright but dusty afternoon, Elias rode into the small town to sell 2 cattle. He hoped the extra money would help him buy warm clothes for the girls before winter. His horse stepped slowly down the main street as Elias tied the reins to a post and started toward the trading post. But before he could take more than a few steps, he heard shouting. People gathered near the center of town, and their faces were filled with nervous curiosity. Elias paused, sensing trouble, and then stepped closer. In the middle of the crowd stood a young woman with dusty clothes and a small bundle of belongings pressed to her chest. 2 rough-looking men stood on either side of her. One grabbed her arm tightly, and the other waved a piece of paper in the air, shouting about unpaid fees. The woman looked frightened, her voice barely reaching Elias's ears as she tried to speak. Her words were soft and shaky, saying she had paid what she could, that she had not agreed to the extra charges they added. But the men ignored her pleas and tightened their hold. Elias felt a strange pull in his chest. He had seen people in trouble before, but something about the fear in her eyes made him step forward. The men claimed the woman owed them money for months of lodging, food, and travel they had provided. Townsfolk watched, whispering but not helping. Some looked away, pretending not to see the injustice happening right in front of them. The woman looked around as if searching for anyone who might step in. But nobody moved. Her face showed exhaustion, as though life had taken everything from her. As Elias moved closer, he noticed how thin she looked, how her hands trembled as she clutched her small bundle. She looked like someone who had walked far, both in distance and in pain. One of the men raised his hand, not to strike but to scare her into more fear. That was when Elias stepped directly between them. "That's enough," he said, in a firm voice that echoed across the street. People fell silent. Even the men seemed surprised by his boldness. "This is none of your business," one of them growled. "It is now," Elias replied, his eyes steady. "Let her go." The 2 men laughed, but it was a nervous sort of laugh. They could see the strength in Elias's posture. He was a rancher, someone familiar with hard work, someone who didn't back down easily. "She owes us money," the taller man snapped. "You want to help? Pay up." The woman shook her head quickly and whispered, "Don't. Please. You don't even know me." Elias didn't look away from the men. Money was tight for him. Everything he earned went toward keeping the ranch alive and taking care of Clara and June. But the sight of this frightened woman weighed heavier than a coin purse. "Put them down," Elias said, pointing to the bundle of belongings one of the men had snatched from her. "I'll pay whatever you ask." The street went quiet. People stared in shock. The men exchanged looks, surprised that anyone would step forward and offer money for someone he didn't even know. "You serious?" one man asked. Elias nodded without hesitation. "Name your price, but release her." The men listed an unfair amount, much more than she likely owed. Elias didn't argue. He took out the earnings he had planned to use for his daughter's winter clothes. His heart squeezed as he counted the bills into the men's hands, but he didn't let it show. Sometimes, doing what was right cost more than doing nothing. Once the men were satisfied, they dropped the woman's arm and left with greedy smiles. The townsfolk began to wander away, whispering about the strange event. The woman stood frozen, her chest rising and falling as though she had been holding her breath for hours. When Elias turned to her, she stepped back slightly, unsure of his intentions. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes shining with confusion and fear. I don't know why you would help me. You looked like you needed someone," Elias said softly. "And those men weren't treating you right." She hugged her small bundle tight and lowered her eyes. "My name is Mara," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "You didn't," Elias replied. "Do you have somewhere to go?" She shook her head slowly. "No home. No family here. I came west with a distant relative, but he left me in another town. Said he'd return. He never did. I worked where I could, but the place I stayed kept adding more charges. I couldn't pay." Elias listened carefully. The sadness in her voice reminded him of the quiet in his own home. He didn't know her story fully, but he knew enough to understand she had suffered greatly. "My ranch is a few miles from here," he said after a moment. "If you need shelter, you can come with me. I can offer food and a place to stay. In return, maybe you can help around the house." Mara's eyes widened, not with fear, but with surprise. "I trust what I saw in your eyes," Elias said simply. "You're not someone who wants trouble. You just need a safe place." Mara hesitated, unsure if she should accept such kindness. But she had nowhere else to go. The world had shown her enough coldness. Maybe this one moment was meant to change her life. "If you're certain," she whispered. Elias nodded and guided her toward his horse. He helped her climb onto the back, and they began the long ride home. The road was quiet, except for the sound of hooves and the rustling of wind through dry grass. "You have children?" Mara asked softly after some time. "2 girls," Elias replied, "Clara and June." "Are they doing well?" Elias sighed. "They're trying. But they need warmth I can't give alone." Mara looked at him with gentle understanding. "Children feel the world deeply," she said softly. "Sometimes all they need is someone who can listen." Her words made Elias glance at her with new curiosity. She spoke gently, with a calmness that comforted him, without effort. When they reached the ranch, the front yard was quiet. Clara and June peeked from behind a post, their eyes wide as they saw a stranger with their father. Mara smiled softly at them, not moving too quickly, not wanting to frighten them. "Girls," Elias said gently, "this is Mara. She'll be staying with us for a while." Clara held June's hand tightly, but the younger girl's eyes were full of curiosity. Mara knelt down slowly, keeping a small distance so the children didn't feel pressured. "It's nice to meet you," Mara said in a soft voice. "I hope we can be friends." The girls didn't speak, but neither did they hide. That small response was enough for Elias to notice. Mara had approached them in a way that felt safe. Inside the house, Mara stood still for a moment, taking in the quiet rooms. They were clean but carried a heaviness, a silence that came from long-term sadness. She noticed small dresses folded neatly on a shelf, toys placed carefully in corners, and a table where 3 plates always sat, even though one had remained empty for a long time. Elias prepared supper while Mara watched, offering to help. She moved slowly, afraid of touching anything without permission. Elias smiled gently and handed her some vegetables to wash. The girls watched from their seats, observing every movement Mara made. They could sense she was different from the people passing through town. She had a gentleness they had missed. After supper, Mara offered to read a story to the girls. At first, they hesitated, but when she opened the book and began speaking in a soft voice, both girls relaxed. Clara leaned forward, listening carefully, while June eventually rested her head on Mara's arm. Elias watched from the doorway, his heart heavy with gratitude. It had been a long time since his daughters had looked that peaceful. He didn't know who Mara truly was, or what her past held, But he knew one thing. Bringing her home had already changed something inside his house. Something that had been lost for years was returning. One small moment at a time. And as the lamplight glowed over the quiet room, Elias wondered if fate had placed Mara in his life not by chance, but because his girls needed something he alone could not give, gentle care from someone with a healing heart. The next morning, the first light of dawn spilled into the ranch house, and Mara woke up before anyone else. She had slept on a small cot near the kitchen, grateful for a roof and a warm blanket. She sat up quietly, unsure if she should move around or wait for Elias to give instructions. Her whole life had taught her to be careful in other people's homes, to stay small and unnoticed. But this place felt different, gentle in a way she had never known. After a moment of hesitation, she rose and began to clean the kitchen, moving slowly, so she wouldn't make noise. She wiped the table, washed the dishes from last night, and even swept the floor. She wanted to show Elias that she meant her words, that she wouldn't be a burden. Elias stepped into the kitchen a short while later, surprised to find her already working. "You didn't have to do all that," he said softly. Mara quickly stepped back. "I only wanted to help. You've given me a place to stay. I want to be useful. I want to be useful." "You are," he said with a gentle smile. "More than you know." His tone was kind, and Mara relaxed a little. Clara and June appeared next, sleepy-eyed and silent. Mara greeted them with a warm smile, but she didn't rush toward them. She remembered how children who carried sadness sometimes needed time before trusting someone new. Instead, she simply asked if they wanted breakfast. June looked up at her father first, as if asking permission, and he nodded. Then June nodded too. And Clara followed a moment later. As they sat at the table, Mara prepared simple porridge and sliced fruit, careful not to overstep. She watched the girls closely, noticing the small things. Clara ate quietly but kept stealing glances at Mara. June reached for her spoon with both hands, a habit she had kept since she was very young. Mara gently moved the bowl closer to her so she wouldn't spill. "Thank you," June whispered before taking a bite. Mara's heart warmed. "You're welcome, sweet girl." After breakfast, Elias prepared to head outside to tend to the ranch. He hesitated at the door, unsure if Mara would feel comfortable staying in the house alone with the girls. But when he turned, he saw her kneeling beside June, helping her tie her shoes with gentle fingers. Clara stood nearby, watching closely, but without fear. Something inside Elias loosened. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't afraid to leave his daughters for a few hours. "I'll be out fixing the fence," he said. "If either of you needs me, I won't be far." Mara nodded. As Elias stepped out into the cool morning air, he felt a relief he hadn't expected. Just knowing someone kind was inside the house with his daughters made the weight on his shoulders feel lighter. Inside, Mara looked around for tasks she could help with. She washed the laundry, folded clothes, and cleaned the rooms. The girls followed her from a small distance, curious but quiet. Mara paused often to talk to them gently, asking about their favorite colors, their mother's recipes, or their favorite stories. They didn't always answer, but they listened. Listening itself was a beginning. Later, when Mara found a torn dress in a drawer, she asked Clara if she could mend it. Clara hesitated, then nodded and handed it to her carefully. Mara sat on the porch with a needle and thread, and Clara sat beside her, watching each stitch. Mara sewed slowly and patiently, making sure the dress looked neat again. "You're very good at that," Clara said softly. Mara smiled. "My mother taught me when I was little." Clara thought about that for a long moment. "Can you teach me too?" Mara's heart lifted gently. Of course. The two of them worked together, with June sitting at their feet, humming to herself. Elias saw them from a distance as he returned from the field, and the sight touched him deeply. His daughters had not sat with another woman like that since their mother passed. Seeing them lean toward Mara, with quiet trust, stirred something hopeful in him. At lunchtime, Mara cooked a simple stew and baked small pieces of bread. As they ate, June leaned her head against Mara's arm, and Clara asked if she would read another story later in the evening. Mara nodded happily, grateful that the girls were beginning to feel safe with her. After lunch, Mara asked Elias if she could help with any chores outside. He hesitated at first, not wanting her to feel burdened, but she insisted gently. "I want to do my part," she said. So Elias showed her how to gather eggs from the chicken coop and how to sort vegetables from the small garden behind the house. She moved slowly at first, unsure of herself. But Elias guided her kindly. He noticed she listened carefully, never complaining, never asking for more than she needed. While they worked, Clara and June played nearby. June picked small flowers and placed them carefully in a circle. Clara tried to braid grass but struggled. Mara joined them, showing Clara how to weave the thin blades together. The girls smiled true, bright smiles that Elias had not seen in many months. For a moment, the ranch didn't feel heavy. It felt alive again. As the sun started lowering, Elias prepared to ride into town again to buy some supplies he didn't get the day before. He paused at the doorway and asked Mara if she felt comfortable staying alone with the girls for an hour or two. Mara nodded, though she felt a bit nervous. She wanted to do well, didn't want to make a single mistake. Before leaving, Elias knelt down to his daughters. "Listen to Mara," he said kindly. "I'll be back before evening." Clara nodded. June wrapped her small arms around her father's neck, then waved goodbye. Elias left, trusting that his home was in gentle hands. While he was gone, Mara helped the girls draw pictures. June drew a horse with legs that looked more like sticks, but Mara praised her effort with a bright smile. Clara drew the ranch, the fences, the hills, and even Mara standing beside the house. Mara's breath caught when she saw herself in the picture. "That's me?" she asked softly. Clara nodded. "Yes, you're helping us." Mara's throat tightened. For years, she had moved from place to place, never belonging anywhere. This simple drawing felt like someone had carved her name into a heart that had been empty for a long time. Later in the afternoon, when June grew sleepy, Mara gently carried her to the rocking chair and hummed a soft tune. Clara leaned against her side, touching the hem of Mara's dress lightly, as if checking whether Mara would move away. But Mara stayed still, letting the girls rest close to her. Elias returned just as the sky turned orange. He stepped inside and saw June asleep on Mara's shoulder and Clara leaning against her other side. Mara looked up with a small, shy smile, and Elias felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. His daughters were safe. More than safe, they were comforted. "Mara," he said quietly, not wanting to wake the girls. "Thank you." She shook her head gently. "You don't need to thank me. They're sweet children. They haven't been this calm in a long time," he said. Mara looked down at them. "Children only need kindness, and someone to hear them." Elias nodded. He saw the truth in her words. He saw it in the peaceful rise and fall of his daughter's breathing. That evening, after the girls went to bed, Elias and Mara sat by the fireplace. The flames danced quietly, filling the room with a soft glow. "I hope I'm not in the way," Mara said softly, looking at her hands. "You're not," Elias said firmly. "You've helped this home more than you know." Mara looked up, her eyes soft but unsure. "I don't want to be a burden. I've never stayed in a place where I felt safe before." "You deserve safety," Elias said, "and you're welcome here." She nodded slowly, taking in his words. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, she felt she wasn't just surviving, she was part of something gentle. As the fire crackled quietly, the ranch no longer felt like a place of sadness. It felt like a place where hearts were learning to soften again. And Elias realized that Mara was not only helping his daughters heal, she was bringing warmth back into his life too. The days turned slowly into weeks. And with every passing sunrise, the ranch began to feel different, lighter, warmer, and more alive than it had in years. Elias noticed the change first in his daughters. Clara, who once kept her feelings locked deep inside, now spoke more freely. She asked questions about cooking, sewing, and even ranch work. June, once afraid of being left alone, now followed Mara everywhere with a smile that could brighten any room. The house, which had felt silent for so long, started filling with gentle laughter, humming, and the calm sound of stories being read aloud each night. Mara, too, began to change, though she didn't realize it at first. She moved through the house with growing confidence, no longer afraid to touch things or to suggest small improvements. She sewed curtains for the kitchen window from old cloth she found in a chest. She organized the shelves, mended torn shirts, and planted herbs near the back door so the family could use them for cooking. Her voice, once soft and uncertain, now carried a little more strength. Elias watched all of this with quiet gratitude. Every evening, when he returned from the fields or from checking the cattle, he found something new: a tidier room, a meal warm on the table, the girls wearing freshly braided hairstyles, or Mara showing Clara how to knit a simple square. The sight brought a sense of peace he had not felt in a long time. It wasn't just the work she did, it was the way she carried herself, gentle but steady, always thoughtful, always careful not to intrude. But even as the ranch grew peaceful, Mara carried silent fears inside her heart. At night, after the girls fell asleep, she would sit on her small cot and wonder if she truly belonged. She worried Elias might someday regret bringing her into his home. She feared the world outside might take this small bit of happiness from her. She had lost so much in her life that sometimes she felt afraid to accept anything good. One morning, as she hung clothes to dry on a line behind the house, Elias approached her with a small smile. He handed her a fresh cup of coffee and leaned against the fence as she worked. The breeze played with her hair, lifting small wisps around her face. She thanked him quietly and continued hanging the laundry. "You've done more for this ranch than you know," Elias said, watching her gently shake out a sheet before clipping it. "I don't think I've seen the girls this happy since before their mother got sick." Mara paused, the cloth still in her hands. She did not want to say the wrong thing. "They're wonderful girls," she said softly. "They just needed someone who understood them." Elias nodded. "And they trust you," he added. "That means something." Mara looked away, unsure how to answer. She didn't know how to accept praise. Instead, she changed the subject. "The herbs near the door will be ready in a few days. Clara wants to help me dry them." "You've taught her a lot," Elias said. "She talks about you all the time." June, too. Mara's cheeks warmed slightly. "I'm happy they feel comfortable with me," she said. She didn't add the part she kept in her heart, that she loved them already. Later that afternoon, Mara prepared a simple lunch, while the girls sat at the table drawing pictures again. Clara drew the ranch with neat lines and steady hands, while June scribbled colorful shapes with great excitement. Mara praised both of them openly. Something small, but meaningful. Children grew under kind words, just as plants grew under sunlight. While they ate, June looked at Mara and asked, "Will you read to us again tonight?" Mara nodded with a gentle smile. "Of course. I'll read as many stories as you like." Clara leaned forward, her voice shy but hopeful. "Can you teach me to bake bread tomorrow?" Mara's smile widened. "Yes. We'll bake together. And maybe we can make something special for your father, too." Both girls giggled happily. Elias returned just then, carrying a sack of feed on his shoulder. He paused at the door, listening to the laughter inside. The sound reached him like warmth on a winter day. He placed the sack down quietly and entered, smiling as the girls ran to him to show their drawings. Mara stepped back, letting them have their moment. But Elias noticed the gentle pride in her eyes. As the evening drew closer, dark clouds gathered in the sky. A storm approached, and the wind began to howl across the open land. Mara helped Elias bring the chickens into shelter and secure the barn doors. The girls stood at the window, watching the rain begin to fall in heavy drops. Thunder rolled across the hills, making June jump. Mara hurried inside and wrapped an arm around the little girl. "It's all right," she whispered, gently rocking her. "Storms can be loud, but they pass." Clara moved closer too, and Mara held both of them as the thunder cracked again. Elias watched from a distance, marveling at how easily she comforted his daughters. He remembered nights when he tried to soothe them alone, feeling helpless and unsure. Mara's presence was like a steady light. Later, when the storm softened, Mara lit a lamp and gathered the girls for story time. She sat on the floor with them, cuddled on either side. Her voice flowed softly through the room, telling tales of brave children, kind-hearted animals, and homes found again after being lost. Elias leaned against the doorway, listening. Something inside him shifted, something he had tried to ignore for weeks. He wasn't sure when it started, maybe the first time she smiled softly at the girls, or the first time she helped June fall asleep, or perhaps when she quietly fixed his torn shirt without being asked. Whatever moment it was, one thing became clear now. She wasn't just helping the ranch. She was helping him, too. Still, he remained silent. He didn't want to overwhelm her. He could see the uncertainty in her eyes, the caution she carried. He didn't want to push her away or frighten her, so he stood quietly, letting her voice warm the room. But the peace of the ranch was not free from outside shadows. A few days later, when Elias rode into town for supplies, he heard talk among the townsfolk. Some wondered why a young woman was living in a widower's home. Others whispered about Mara's past, making up details they didn't know. Elias felt anger rise inside him. They didn't know her kindness, her gentle nature, the way she healed his daughter's hurts, without ever asking for anything in return. He returned home with frustration in his chest. Mara sensed something was wrong as soon as she saw his face. She waited until the girls were busy playing with their dolls, before approaching him. "Is everything all right?" she asked gently. Elias hesitated. He didn't want to trouble her, but she looked at him with concern that could not be ignored. So he explained what he heard in town, carefully avoiding harsh details. Mara listened quietly, her hands tightening around the cloth she was holding. When he finished, she looked down at the floor. "They think I don't belong here," she whispered. "People always think that." Elias stepped closer. "You do belong here. Don't let their words make you doubt that." But Mara felt fear creeping back into her heart. That night, when everyone slept, she quietly packed the few things she had. She didn't want to bring shame to Elias or his daughters. She didn't want them to suffer because of her. Before dawn, she slipped outside and walked toward the road leading away from the ranch. But Elias woke early, as he always did. When he saw her empty cot, panic filled him. He rushed outside, calling her name. He found her at the crossroads, shaking with cold and fear. "Mara," he called out, running toward her. She froze, tears filling her eyes. "I didn't want to cause trouble," she whispered. "The girls don't need people talking badly about them because of me." Elias stepped close and shook his head. "You didn't cause anything. Those people don't know you. They don't know your heart. I don't want to bring harm to your family," she said. "You're part of this family," Elias replied, his voice firm but gentle. "My girls need you, and I want you to stay, not because I need help, but because this home is better with you in it." Mara covered her face with her hands, crying softly. Elias waited patiently until she lifted her head again. "Come back home," he said quietly. Please. Mara nodded, her shoulders shaking with relief. She followed him back toward the ranch, unsure of the future, but certain of one thing: she mattered here. As the sun rose over the hills, Elias felt a deep hope growing in his chest. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one truth: Mara belonged with them. The next days after Mara's return held a quiet softness, as if the ranch itself understood something important had been mended. Elias didn't pressure her with questions, nor did he treat her differently. Instead, he simply let life continue naturally, giving her space to breathe and settle again. Mara, in her gentle way, tried even harder to help, though Elias wished she wouldn't carry so much weight in her heart. He could see she wanted to prove she wasn't a burden, but he also wanted her to know she didn't have to earn her place every day. Clara and June were the ones who noticed the change first. They sensed something had happened, something that made their father more protective and made Mara more thoughtful. But they didn't ask questions. Instead, they stayed close to Mara, almost as if they feared she might disappear again. One morning, June woke early and crawled into Mara's arms while she was still sitting quietly by the small window. Mara lifted her gently and hugged her close. "Did you have a bad dream?" she asked, softly. June shook her head. "No. I just wanted to make sure you were still here." Those simple words, spoken with a child's honest heart, filled Mara's eyes with tears she quickly wiped away. She kissed June's forehead and whispered, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Clara joined them moments later, leaning against Mara with a quiet sigh. Elias watched them from the doorway, his eyes filled with a warmth he could no longer hide. His daughters were happier, safer, and more open than they had been in years. And it was because of the woman sitting on the floor with them. As winter slowly approached, the winds grew colder, and the mountains in the distance were capped with snow. Life on the ranch shifted into a new rhythm. Elias split firewood every morning, stacking it near the door so the house stayed warm. Mara cooked hearty meals to keep the family full during the cold months. Clara and June helped her knead dough and stamp patterns into small cookies. Laughter filled the kitchen almost every day. Sometimes, in the evenings, when the sun dipped behind the hills and the sky turned a soft blue, Mara would step outside to breathe in the cold air. The open land stretched out in every direction, peaceful and quiet. She had never imagined she would find safety in a place so far from the world she once knew. One evening, while she stood outside watching the snowflakes swirl down, Elias stepped onto the porch. He carried 2 mugs of warm tea and offered one to her. She accepted it with a shy nod. "It's beautiful tonight," he said, looking out at the falling snow. "It is," Mara agreed. "I used to be scared of storms. They reminded me of all the things I couldn't control. But here, it feels different." Elias glanced at her. "Maybe it feels different because you're not facing it alone anymore." She lowered her eyes at his words. "I'm not used to anyone standing beside me. I'm not used to." He took a slow breath. "Maybe it's time you let someone." Their eyes met for a brief moment, soft and full of things neither dared to say yet. Mara felt her cheeks warm, and she looked away, pretending to focus on the lantern swinging gently in the wind. Inside, Clara and June played quietly with wooden toys. The house glowed with warmth from the fire, and the smell of fresh bread filled the rooms. Elias knew this wasn't just a home anymore, it was a place of healing. Over the next week, the girls grew even more attached to Mara. They wanted her beside them at meals, during playtime, and especially at bedtime. Mara told them gentle stories, sang soft lullabies, and left the lamp burning until they fell asleep. She didn't see it, but Elias did. The girls were beginning to rely on her the way they once relied on their mother. One evening, June tugged at Elias's shirt with her tiny fingers. "Papa," she whispered, "can Mara read us the bedtime story again?" Elias smiled. "She will." Then Clara stepped forward, clutching a folded paper. Elias sat on the chair and unfolded the drawing. His heart tightened. Clara had drawn 4 figures: a tall man, a woman with long hair, and 2 small girls, holding hands. Underneath the picture, in her careful handwriting, Clara had written one word: family. Elias looked up at Clara, speechless for a moment. Clara lifted her shoulders shyly. "It's us," she explained. "Me, June, you, and Mara." The weight of the picture settled in Elias's chest. It felt both heavy and hopeful. He smoothed Clara's hair and kissed her forehead. "It's beautiful," he whispered. Later that night, after the girls fell asleep, Elias stepped onto the porch again. Mara was already there, sitting quietly, her hands wrapped around a warm cup. "Clara drew something today," he said softly. Mara looked up. Elias held out the picture. The lamplight shone on the drawing, and Mara's breath caught as she saw her own figure standing beside the family. I didn't know they thought of me like that," she whispered. "They do," Elias said gently, "because you've given them something no one else could." Mara blinked rapidly as tears filled her eyes. "I don't know if I deserve that," she said. "I've never really belonged anywhere." "Friend." Elias stepped closer, his voice steady. "You belong here. You've made this place warm again. The girls sleep peacefully because of you. They smile because you're here. And well, this home doesn't feel lonely anymore." Mara looked up at him, surprised at the honesty in his words. "I don't want you to ever feel like you're just helping out," he continued. "You matter to this family." Mara swallowed hard, unable to speak for a moment. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to," he replied softly. "Not right now." The next days moved gently, like snow falling without sound. Mara continued to care for the girls, and Elias found excuses to work nearer the house so he could see them often. He had grown to care for Mara in a way he hadn't expected. But he knew she needed time. Time to trust. Time to feel safe. Time to believe she deserved a home. One cold morning, as the family ate breakfast, Clara suddenly asked, "Mara, will you stay with us forever?" Mara froze, her spoon pausing mid-air. Elias waited, his heart beating a little faster. Mara placed her spoon down slowly. "I don't know what the future holds," she answered carefully. "But I want to stay as long as you want me here." Clara nodded quickly. "We want you here." June leaned into Mara's arm. "You make everything warm." Mara's eyes softened, and she hugged them both close. "Then I'll stay." Later that evening, while the girls played with their wooden animals, Elias stepped outside and found Mara gathering dried herbs. He hesitated before speaking. "There's something I want to ask you," he said. Mara turned, waiting quietly. "You've changed this home," Elias said. "You've given my daughters what I alone couldn't give. You've given me something too. Peace, comfort, hope." Mara felt her breath catch. "I don't want you to stay just because you feel you owe us," he continued. "I want you to stay because you choose to. You don't have to work to earn a place here. You already have one." She looked down at her hands. "I never imagined someone would say that to me." Elias stepped closer. "Let this be your home, Mara, not as a visitor, not as someone passing through, but as family." Her eyes shone with quiet emotion. "If I stay, will I truly be welcome?" "Well," Elias nodded. "Yes, more than welcome." Just then, the girls rushed outside, holding a small blanket between them. "Mama Mara," June called without thinking. Both Elias and Mara froze. The words hung in the air, soft but powerful. June gasped and covered her mouth. Clara looked frightened, unsure if she had said something wrong. But Mara knelt down, tears forming. "It's all right," she whispered, pulling the girls into her arms. "It's all right." Elias watched them, his heart full. When Mara stood, she looked at Elias with a trembling smile. If this is truly my home, then yes, I choose to stay. And with those words, something settled in the ranch like a warm blanket. The wind still blew cold across the land. Snow still fell. Work still waited in the fields. But inside the house, the fire burned brighter than ever, because a family not born of blood, but born of kindness, had finally come together. And Mara, once a lost and frightened soul, had found not just shelter, but a place where she was needed, wanted, and loved.